In this debate today, I'd like to be analyzing the question primarily based on the resolution, which is that it is possible that the Earth is flat. Now, I'd like to home in to begin with on an issue of framework, which is the fundamental question of what is possibility, because the resolution asks us a question of possibility. It does not ask us a question of probability or even plausibility, but rather a question of possibility. Now, in order to fully understand what the resolution is asking us, I believe it is necessary that we analyze what possibility actually means. So with that, I'd like to present my definition, which is from the Oxford Dictionary's, quote, able to be done or achieved, that may exist or happen, but that is not certain or probable. Now, what this essentially means is that the prose side today must prove possibility. Not necessarily plausibility or even probability, but simply that there is a possibility. Now the inverse of this is that the con, if you vote con, you are convinced that it is an impossibility that the Earth is flat. If you vote pro, you are convinced that there is at least a possibility that the Earth is flat. If you vote con, you are saying that without a doubt, based on all the knowledge you have, there is no way that the Earth is flat. So with that in mind, now that we've established kind of what possibility means, the opposite of possibility being impossibility, let's look at what the issue of possibility is. What exactly makes up a possibility? And if you look at statistics based on the odds of you as a person existing, based on all the other possibilities for people who could have been conceived other than yourself, people who could have survived other than yourself, your ancestors that might not have survived. The article published on a blog it's called Science Right, based on concluded that there's ultimately, and I can show this article, a odds of 1 to 10, 1 against 10 to the 2,685,000, which is 10 followed by 2,685,000 zeros, an astronomical number. Yet I'm going to assume that my opponent actually does exist. Therefore, we can conclude that this is a possibility, even if it's 1 times 10 to the 2,685,000. This is an astronomically low possibility. What I can therefore conclude is that if we have the slightest doubt that we do not have all the evidence at hand to determine that the Earth is or is not flat, we must conclude that it is possible. In other words, I'm taking the agnostic position today, that it may or may not be possible. I do not have all the knowledge. Thank you.
Well, it appears that my opponent is taking the stance that if he can show 0.0000000 infinity zeros 1%, then he should win the round. That's a ridiculous stance to take, and there's no reason to have a debate if that's the actual stance that we're going to have. The purpose of a debate is to have even ground on both sides. That's why we need to have actual standards that can give both sides a chance in this. So I have two responses to my opponent's overall position, which he didn't even address the resolution other than one word of the resolution, the word possible. But I have two problems with his definition and with his overall perspective on the word possible. The first is that he's using the wrong context of the word possible. There are two contexts of possible. One of them is possible as in anything is possible, which is the definition that he's using. The other definition of possible would be the idea that there's some level of merit to the idea, some level of plausibility. You know, for instance, if I was to say, yeah, that seems possible, it's very different than anything's possible. They're two completely different contexts. We have to use the possibility, the context of it as possibility as in some level of merit, because that would make more sense. As to my second response, which is that of abusive as a debate resolution. According to my opponent's definition, he has almost nothing he has to do. He has to just show that nothing. He just has to show that flat Earth is part of anything. That is, he's turned the resolution into a tautology, a truism, as it were, and that does not make sense as a debate resolution. So I'm going to provide a counter definition of possible, which is from the American Heritage Dictionary, and it's capable of happening, existing, or being true without contradicting proven facts, laws, or circumstances. Now, there's two reasons to prefer this, and they're the inverse of what my opponent just had. The first reason is that it's the correct context. This is the version that would be actually in line with the resolution. And the second reason to prefer is that it gives reasonable ground to both sides. For instance, let me provide a standard for how we can view this round. The standard is that of a viable scientific theory. If my opponent can show that a flat Earth is a scientific idea with enough merit to be taken seriously, then he should win the round. He would have shown that a flat Earth is capable of happening or being true without contradicting proven facts or circumstances. In this way, we give ground to both sides. I have to show that it is not capable of being true without contradicting known facts. He has to show that it is capable of being true without contradicting known facts. Now, with that said, let me move into my contention, which is that it is proven fact that the Earth is round. And I have two subpoints under this. The first is that of visual evidence. We actually can see evidence taken from space that shows that the Earth is round. This is visual evidence, conclusive proof. We already know that the Earth is round. We have clear and convincing evidence of this. My second subpoint is that of world travel. If I was to turn to the east, I could go to the east and come all the way back around to this same place today. That is only possible if the Earth is round. I challenge my opponent to show me some level of evidence.
I would like to first of all analyze what my opponent has argued by simply pointing out that he contests that I'm using the wrong context for possibility, but he has not provided any context for the idea of impossibility. Now, it stands to reason if I am for possibility, then my opponent must be for impossibility. And therefore, if you look at any reasonable definition of impossibility, it will say that there is no chance whatsoever. If there's the slightest chance, then it is possible. If there is not the slightest chance, then it is impossible. My opponent is essentially trying to abandon an entire word of the resolution here when he says that we need to have fair ground, that we need to create equal ground on both sides of the debate. What we need to do is go based on the resolution as it is presented. The resolution was what both sides agreed to prima facie before the debate round began, and the resolution clearly states a dichotomy between possibility versus impossibility. The con contending that it is impossible, the pro contending that there is at least some level of possibility. And so I would contend that the arguments of context here are not taking into account the fact that we still need to know that to vote con, it is factually impossible. I would challenge him to bring up a definition of impossible that jives with his with the context that he is seeking today. Now, I'd like to also look at his counter definition he brought up from the American Heritage Dictionary. Now, this says that something that is possible must be in line with proven facts and scientific laws. Now, I would like to take a moment to talk about the nature of science in and of itself, because the whole concept of proven facts and laws is something that is fundamentally unscientific. You see, the nature of science is such that it creates plausible theories. It creates, based on the evidence it has, working models that provides us with accurate, with at least to the best of our knowledge, accurate models of what the world looks like. But it does not claim that this is necessarily how the world looks like. If you look at reality, you'll see that throughout history, for example, the flat Earth model has been considered to be scientifically backed. And you can look at many other examples throughout the world where scientific models have reportedly been disproven. There are many reasons I could get into, but basically the fundamental problem is that science is done by human beings, and that human beings have limited observational and reasoning analytical skills. And therefore, whenever we look at scientific evidence, it's never conclusive. It's always only probably. And so when we look at the idea that science proves something, it actually doesn't do that. His definition here simply makes no sense. The definition that we really need, science and possibility, are two different things. And if that's one thing we need to understand in this debate, it's that.
So before I go on, what do you think is provable to a reasonable, to complete 100% certainty?
Absolutely. I believe that, for example, analytical truths, for example, 2 + 2 = 4, that's provable based on our definitions of the word. And Immanuel Kant talked about the difference between analytical knowledge and synthetic knowledge. Analytic knowledge being the idea that we can, that we're talking about terms that we define. So like saying all brothers are male, that's based on the definition of the word brother. You can't disprove that. Whereas other statements about brothers, like saying all brothers being jealous or something like that, that's a synthetic idea. That's the type of thing that can be proven.
Ironically, because you've defined the word possible in this way, you've already turned the resolution into a truism. You've already made it say exactly that. You're turning the resolution into something it doesn't mean. I'm going to use an example here of the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams last year were 4-12, one of the worst teams in football. And if someone had asked, is it possible that the Los Angeles Rams will win the Super Bowl? The response would be, any possible, which actually means no. As opposed to this year, they're 5-9. They look like they could be potential champions. Someone asked the question, is it possible that the Rams could be Super Bowl champions? The response would be, yeah, it's possible. They're completely different contexts of the word possible. The second context of the word possible is the one that would be included in this debate resolution. You can't have a debate resolution that's a truism because it's already said one thing. For instance, if the resolution was 2 = 2, there would be no con. There would be no way for a con to do that. By you defining the resolution as a truism, which you even said that's literally what you're doing, then you already have turned the resolution into something which is undebatable. So that's clearly not the correct definition. You talked about how we need to look at the resolution that we both agreed on. Yeah, I agree. The resolution we both agreed on, but we can't turn that resolution into something that completely removes the potential for debate. That's why we look at my definition, which is the accurate contextual definition. It's the one which points to ground on both sides, and the standard I presented, which is that of a viable scientific theory. I offered you a perfectly reasonable interpretation of this resolution, which is that if you were to be able to show that a flat Earth is a viable scientific theory, you will have shown that it is possible. As opposed to me, if I can show that it is not a viable scientific theory, it is impossible according to the way we can measure this as humans. My next response is that of the word Earth. By the fact that we have the word Earth in the resolution, we are specifically referring to the material, the physical, the scientific. You might not like the physical, the material, the scientific, but that is the context in which this debate is supposed to be occurring. Now, with that being said, I don't want this to turn into a silly definition debate for the entire half an hour. Let's actually focus on the resolution itself. So let's look again at whether or not a flat Earth has been shown to be true. My opponent still has not shown a single argument showing why a flat Earth is a viable scientific theory or is in any way something that we should be believing in. Now, we can point to the fact that there are numerous private and public organizations who have taken pictures from space, who have shown visually that there is a scientific proof on the fact that there is a round, global, circular Earth. We also know this by the fact that we can look, we can put a stick in the ground, and we can watch shadows go around this stick. And as time goes on, you will see that would only be possible if the Earth was round. My opponent has not shown you any way in which it's been shown to be possible except this nothingness.
One question for you before I move on. Would you say that that if you were asked about the Los Angeles Rams last year, would a proper answer to the question of would they win the Super Bowl be no, that's impossible?
It could be. It would simply be the response would be whichever definition of possible you were going to use. You would not use the context of possible as in, yeah, there's some level of merit to it. You would use the level of possible as, no, they're not going to. I mean, technically it's possible. That would be the version you'd be using. You're using that version. I'm using the version that actually makes sense contextually in the resolution.
So at this point, I'd like to point out that, well, I wanted to get into some fun stuff about Immanuel Kant, Jean Baudrillard, and all the other fun philosophers who said that reality is essentially unknowable in that we can't accurately understand, we can't accurately grapple with what reality really is. In fact, I have a quantum physicist who says that quantum mechanics is basically admitting that there is no way we can understand reality as it really is because there's no way we can actually understand quarks and all the reality of quantum physics. But I'm not going to go into that since my opponent has basically admitted that based on my definition of possibility, yes, flat Earth theory is possible because it is a tautology. He's claimed that it's necessarily true. Now, I'm saying, I'm arguing here that the definition of possibility makes it really impossible to, essentially I'm critiquing the resolution here. I'm saying that the problem that today we have a resolution that says that it is possible that the Earth is flat. If we wanted to debate whether the Earth itself is flat, we would say, is the Earth flat? That's the simplest way of debating whether whether we're talking about flat Earth or whether we're talking about the nature of possibility. The question asked is is it possible? Now, my opponent has kind of tried to weave around the question of impossibility, but when you look at any reasonable definition of impossibility, it's that there's no chance whatsoever. And so if the corollary to this means that if there is not no chance whatsoever, it must be possible. Now, we've conceded that essentially if there is no way based on science, we can conclude that there is no chance whatsoever. In fact, I talked about how human beings have imperfect logical reasoning skills, imperfect observational skills, which means that science can never provide certainty. We can never have complete certainty as to whether or not something does not exist. In fact, at this point, I'd like to turn to a fellow named let's see if Carlo Rovelli, who is a theoretical physicist in Italy, and he says science is not about certainty. Science is about finding the most reliable way of thinking at the present level of knowledge. Science is extremely reliable. It's not certain. In fact, not only is it not certain, but it's the lack of certainty that grounds it. Now, and he goes on to say the very expression of scientifically proven is a contradiction in terms. There is nothing that is scientifically proven. And so the problem that I see here today is that my opponent is claiming an absolute knowledge about the nature of the Earth, which is that the Earth is in fact, he's claiming that he knows beyond any level of doubt that the Earth is round, that it is not flat. Whereas I don't see that we have the knowledge, that we have the ability to claim that that is not true. I, for one, have not seen the visual evidence that says that the...
Okay, so I think there's an important thing that has to be pointed out here. My opponent literally told us in his last speech, he already knows he's turning the resolution into a tautology. By so doing, he's literally saying the resolution means 2 equals 2. But that is not a debatable resolution, which is why we should reject his definition, because it's not debatable in the first place. That's clearly not the context that we were supposed to be listening to. That's why I presented a perfectly reasonable counter definition, which actually shows the correct context of a debate resolution, something we both can debate with a perfectly reasonable standard that both of us will have reasonable ground on. You can't have a debate resolution that is 1 equals 1 or 2 equals 2 because there's nothing about it to debate. He himself has agreed that according to his definition, that's what he's doing. That means there's no debate if you accept his definition, which is why you should accept mine, which is from a perfectly reasonable source. It's the correct context of the word. It's like the second version of the Los Angeles Rams, as in there's some level of merit to the idea. That's why you should accept my definition. Now, with that being said, let's actually go to the meat of this debate. The only point he has about a flat earth is that he's saying that I'm saying absolute knowledge. Well, my response is that of no, according to our material knowledge. According to our material minds, we can get as close as possible through the material. We already know that the resolution is asking us to analyze this according to material minds because it's pointing to material things, such as the earth. That's already in the resolution. We already know we're supposed to be using science, we're supposed to be using material, we're supposed to be using the physical. That's why we point to physical essence. Now, my opponent has never shown you any way whatsoever in which the physical essence of the earth has been shown to be flat. He hasn't even shown that it's a thing that deserves some level of merit. Let's actually look at the people who are arguing for this. The Charles Johnson, who led the Flat Earth Society from 1972 until his death in 2001, had this published in his New York Times obituary, saying, quote, Mr. Johnson, who called himself the last iconoclast, regarded scientists as witch doctors pulling off a gigantic hoax so as to replace religion with science. He said that reasonable, intelligent people have always recognized that the earth is flat, end quote. But that's not actually true. It's completely ridiculous. In fact, historian Jeffrey Burton Russell writes that, quote, a round earth appears as early as the 6th century BC. The sphericity of the earth was accepted by all educated Greeks and Romans. With extraordinary few exceptions, no educated person in the history of Western civilization has ever believed that the earth was flat, end quote. Point being, all throughout history, anytime science has analyzed this, we have come to the conclusion that we have physical, visual, and any form of evidence that we possibly can to show that the earth is round.
Now, I'd like to basically sum up what we've seen so far, we've talked about how the resolution is a tautology, and somehow that makes that makes me the one who's framing this debate as something that it is not. Now, my opponent has said that we couldn't debate something like 2 + 2 = 4, and I would agree with that. Problem is, I didn't pick this resolution, and so suppose we had a resolution that was in fact 2 + 2 = 4. Should I be penalized for being the one that points out that 2 + 2 = 4 is not a debatable resolution, and that it's based on the nature of 2 + 2 = 4? No, I'm simply in the same. That's simply the truth. At this point, I'm pointing out that the wording of the resolution is simply the truth. That there is no real way to disprove it based on the wording of the resolution, and that we ultimately have to take the resolution based on its wording. I didn't word this resolution. In fact, I basically picked it because I saw that it was based on faulty wording. And once again, you have to understand that we're looking at an issue of not me trying to twist this debate into something that it's not meant to be, but simply pointing out that the resolution makes assumptions that it cannot make. There are ways you could legitimately phrase this resolution. Unfortunately, the resolution that is, as it is phrased, is not one of them. And so both teams were presented this resolution, both accepted the resolution, and I would claim that me simply pointing out that 2 + 2 = 4 is not an illicit grabbing of grounds in this case. Now, I'd like to move on to sort of the issue of what is the flat Earth. Now, we've talked about the nature of science. In fact, I've talked about how science cannot provide certainty. And we've talked about how the resolution asks for certainty. If you vote con, you have certainty that the Earth is flat. My opponent has said we have visual evidence, but once again, I challenge him. Has he seen that from outer space? Has he seen the Earth in its three-dimensional curve? Has he actually seen that? If not, he is relying solely on the evidence, on hearsay evidence. Once again, there's the possibility. I'm not the probability or even plausibility, but there is the possibility that such evidence is corrupt. At the same time, he talks about circumnavigation, and that's very easy to get around, because in the flat Earth model, circumnavigation is accomplished because you are sailing around the North Pole. In other words, the entire Earth is kind of shaped like a disc with the North Pole at the center and Antarctica around the edges. And as far as I know, no one's ever sailed through Antarctica. So in that case, the flat Earth model is not disproven based on the flat Earth. But my purpose here isn't really to debate the flat Earth model. I, for one, don't find it probable or even plausible. But I do believe that the nature of possibility here is...
Okay, so we have two conflicting definitions in this round, and this is really important to understand. My opponent, according to his definition, is telling you that it is not a debatable resolution. He literally just said that to you. He told you why you should not accept his definition, because according to his definition, we do not have a debatable resolution. But we have an alternative. We could use the correct context of the word possible, which is the one that I provided, which says that we're analyzing it to see if there's some level of merit to the idea. That's what it seems clear. If you asked a common man, it is possible that the Earth is flat. The question that we would then have is, I don't know, should we believe it? I don't know. Let's see. Let's see if there's something to this. Show me some arguments. My opponent has not shown you any arguments. He hasn't shown you any way in which this is shown to be the case. We have his definition versus my definition. We clearly should not be taking his definition because it's not debatable. It's not the correct context. And in the resolution itself, we point to the word Earth. We're clearly talking about this from the physical, material, scientific level. So my opponent is completely trying to squirrel his way into this resolution, and he himself has told you why his definition doesn't even work. So with that being said, let me read my definition one more time. Capable of happening, existing, or being true without contradicting proven facts, laws, or circumstances. The way we can determine this would be by asking, is a flat Earth a viable scientific theory? I'm not requiring that my opponent should show that it is proven or that it's plausible or that it's true. Simply that it's a scientific idea that deserves some merit. So far, he hasn't even come close. He hasn't shown you a single argument showing why it's an idea that deserves some merit. He asked me, have I seen the Earth's curve? No, but I actually have talked to people who have. I've talked to a couple of astronauts. I've talked to pilots. I would actually challenge my opponent to show me, if he's going to act like what we have scientifically, can he show that the millions of people at the 50 plus different space agencies who have been out in space, can he show that there's this massive conspiracy with the pictures that they've been taking? Can he show that? Can he show that maybe they fired someone and that someone exposed what was actually going on? There was a conspiracy going on there. Can he show that? Otherwise, if he can't show that, then what we have is proof, conclusive proof, that a flat Earth is not capable of happening without contradicting proven fact. We also can talk about just regular pilots, or we can get on a plane right now and go to Moscow and keep going around. We would eventually come back right here to this Earth. We literally have it right in front of us. There is simply no way around this. The only thing that he talked about is he doesn't think anyone's ever sailed around the flat Earth. And he talked about Antarctica. Well, actually, you can sail over Antarctica. There are flights that do it all the time. You can get cruises that do the same thing. There's no evidence he's shown in any way.
Now, as I close out this debate for the pro side, I'd like to emphasize, first of all, that I would contend that I uphold both his definition and my definition. You see, I have contested throughout the majority of this round that that there is no such thing as scientifically proven. Yet his definition relies on the idea that we can have scientifically proven facts, and that it has to be in line with proven scientific facts. Now, I've said a number of times, and I can't recall him contesting this specifically, that science cannot actually prove something, and so his definition seems faulty here. Now, once again, I'm not claiming that he's talked about how we should be debating whether the flat Earth is a valid scientific theory. I say that's not the resolution. The resolution is that it is possible that the Earth is flat. If the resolution was supposed to be that it is a viable scientific theory that the Earth is flat, then let it be that. But that was not the resolution that was presented. That's not the resolution I see written on the board. And so I'm forced to be left with the conclusion that if you vote pro, you're voting for the side that we cannot say for certain that the Earth is not flat. And if you vote con, you are saying without any doubt the Earth is definitely not flat. It's ultimately, this debate comes down to agnosticism, that we do not necessarily know that the Earth is flat, versus, well, a claim of absolute knowledge that we do know that the Earth is flat. Now, he asked me to prove that there was some sort of conspiracy. My job today is simply to show that there is a possibility of doubt, that it is possible. And I showed that, in that there is possible that that there could be a conspiracy. I did not claim that was likely, just possible. Thank you.
Again, it comes down to the word possible. So I have two voting issues in this round. The first voting issue is that of possible. We have to look at these definitions, because clearly this round comes down to the definitions we have. If you accept my opponent's definition, he had already told you that this was an undebatable resolution. That clearly is not the way the resolution was supposed to be written. Because according to him, if you accept his definition, this isn't even a resolution. So clearly that is an abusive definition, which is not the one we're supposed to be looking at in this round. More than that, I offered you the context. There's two different contexts of the word possible that you can use. Think back to the Rams last year. Could they win? Anything's possible, but that means no. As opposed to this year, if you ask the Rams, could they win? Yeah, it seems possible. There's some merit to the idea that they could do it. It's a viable theory. Clearly, that is the context of possible we're supposed to be looking at. So with that being said, this leads to my second voting issue, which is that of science. Now, he responded to the point of science by saying that science can't prove things. That's what he's been going with this whole thing. Well, that you can't prove things to 100.0% certainty, but you can show them to a reasonable degree of certainty. You can show certain things to a high level of certainty, and that's all we can do. That's what we're trying to do in this debate round. The resolution itself points to the material world. The word Earth shows us that we're supposed to be looking to science, to the physical, to the material world. According to the material world, how close can we get? What is the highest level of proof we can get? Now, the answer is he has shown you literally nothing to suggest that the Earth is flat. I've pointed you to pieces of evidence. I've pointed you to visual evidence. I pointed you to the fact that you can test it yourself. You can put a stick in the ground right now and then watch over the next 24 hours. You will see that the shadow will go around, it will grow, and it will shrink. The only way that would be possible would be if the Earth is round. Once again, the word possible means capable of happening without contradicting proven facts, laws, or circumstances. My opponent has never shown you otherwise. He's never shown you that a flat Earth is capable of happening without contradicting proven facts. I have shown you how it contradicts proven facts. There is a clear reason to vote for the con in this round. Thank you.